Welcome back to season 2 of Ilewara Atioi, episode number 3. Today we are discussing a little bit about thinking beyond how we normally define value, taking lessons from real life examples of how we can define value and create different metrics for evaluating projects that take more of a lens of human quality of life as opposed to just the normal profit lens, which leads sometimes to greed and doesn't always consider human life and the quality of human life first. So the name of today's episode is Value Beyond Money, Lessons from Burkina Faso. So most of us grow up being taught that money we earn is a reflection of the value of our work. If you get paid a lot, your work must be valuable. And if you get paid a little, maybe the work that you're doing isn't as valuable. But you know what? What if that equation is incomplete? For example, we all need to eat every day. Yet our farmers are sometimes some of the lowest paid folks in society. And what they do is essential for our quality of life. So is it really true to say that, if they earn little, that the value of their work is little? I think not. The truth is, value doesn't always show up in a paycheck or in a bank account or even in currency at all. Sometimes the most valuable work we do pays in dignity, in safety, in education, and things like energy, smoother roads, clean water. These are things that get at the everyday value and quality of our lives. So today we're exploring how communities are redefining what it means to be compensated. We're going to be taking a look at an example from Burkina Faso, and then we'll explain to other places where people are creating prosperity by improving quality of life and not just chasing profits. So when we think about compensation, our minds usually jump straight to money, our salaries, wages, bonuses. For some folks, those are stock options and etc. But step back for a moment. Have you ever done anything in your life where you didn't get directly paid monetarily, yet you still gain something of value from those experiences? So when you think of things like volunteering or doing something for your community or helping a family member, there is no direct paycheck for that, but there is a return that you do get from that. So economists sometimes call this social capital, but for everyday people, it's simply the reality that not all value is measured in dollars. Good roads have values, clean drinking water have value, and strong communities also have value that they provide to us. So the idea here is that when people recognize that, they start to build systems where the compensation isn't financial profit. The compensation is them having a better quality of life. Looking at Burkina Faso as a case study, when we look at Burkina Faso, this is a landlocked country in West Africa. And if you look at world statistics, they would say that this is one of the poorest nations by GDP per capita. So traditionally, infrastructure projects like roads, bridges, buildings, these were usually underfunded or outsourced to foreign contractors. And outsourcing to foreign contractors usually is associated with things like higher costs. And communities didn't always directly benefit from those contracts. I mentioned in one of the other episodes that sometimes these foreign deals and foreign contracts don't always even come with local labor, meaning it doesn't always create the jobs that we would think that should be created, because sometimes the folks with the foreign contracts bring in their own people from abroad and don't hire as many local people. So those skills end up not being developed within the countries. But in Burkina Faso recently, the government has taken a different approach. They have done things like they have purchased heavy equipment like bulldozers, graders, trucks, things that are usually reserved for private construction firms. And instead of relying on external contractors, what they have done instead is they've engaged the local people, engineers, and workers to put the equipment that they've purchased to use, building infrastructure in their communities that was desperately needed. I don't have exactly the number on hand here, but there are some stats out there that since independence up until recently, they had a certain number of paved roads, and that stat had not really moved for many years up until the investments that are being made by the government now and the president that's leading now, Ibrahim Traore, where now they have a plan to build more roads and invest in infrastructure in a way that hasn't been done over the last several decades. So what's happening here? So on the surface, workers are not being paid the same way that if a private company came in, they would be paid. If we're talking about compensation, things such as paychecks. But the payoff here is huge. Every kilometer of road that is built improves trade. Every water canal that they dig and build helps farmers grow crops more reliably. Schools that are built give the next generation a chance at better literacy and more opportunities. So what is happening here is the investment that the people are making and that the government is making in the purchase of this equipment and the reliance on the local population to learn how to utilize this equipment to build necessary infrastructure. The people are paying themselves in long-term dividends where they'll be able to have safer travel, cleaner environments, better access to healthcare and markets. They're building an ecosystem, and that ecosystem is rewarding. It's leading to a better quality of life for sure. Even just something as simple as saying that you have safer roads. Safer roads should lead to less accidents. Less accidents leads to less life-harming circumstances, and perhaps even the saving of lives and the saving of destroying families. So that's a huge dividend, a huge payout that can't be quantified by someone's paycheck. So think about that shift. Instead of waiting for private aid or private investment to trickle down, the people of Burkina Faso are harnessing their own capacity. They're proving that prosperity can be built when we focus on quality of life and not simply on just extracting profit. Not to say that investors can't make profit from the things that they choose to invest in, but this is also one of the reasons why I think African nations need to start looking into other African nations for additional trade, as opposed to looking for foreign investment as the first place we run to when we want to complete projects. Value, again, doesn't have to just be measured in traditional currency systems. If we can see value in what one country has versus what another country has and be able to trade with our brothers and sisters, then we can continue to provide value to each other, as long as the equipment that is needed, the skills and the knowledge that are needed are present on both sides of the equation. We can actually work on projects that are going to be for the greater good of African development and building Ilewara Tiyoi without it having to be billion-dollar valuations that are inflated and not necessarily based in a lot of reality. So here are some other examples, because Burkina Faso isn't alone. Across Africa and beyond, communities are embracing this mindset. So with Rwanda, I've seen that every last Saturday of the month, they say they have an observance of Umuganda, and I apologize if I said that wrong. I'm just a Yoruba girl. It's a community work day where people gather to clean, repair, and build. So this is taking time to fix roads, painting schools, cleaning the neighborhoods, and it's not something that no one gets paid to do, but the nation is transformed in these actions. So visitors to places like Kigali, the capital, often say that the environment is clean and organized. Well, it being clean and organized and providing that experience to tourists and visitors is just not something that's by chance or by luck. It's because the people of Rwanda are taking part in this action to present themselves in a good light and to keep a clean environment for themselves and for the folks that would be visiting. So that's a cumulative value of community labor there. Another example that I see here is with Ghana, where in many rural community areas, they come together to build schools and health posts. And you have folks that live in some of those rural areas that are donating their labor, materials, while sometimes NGOs or government entities would provide some technical expertise or supplies. And so the result of this is being able to have some functioning schools and clinics that can benefit the entire community. And so again, here the compensation isn't money, but instead the compensation is trying to give the local communities access to healthcare and education and ultimately to opportunity. So even in places, whether it's in places like Lagos or even in America, which places like Detroit, you can see things like this happening where you could have things like community gardens or that could be built in empty or abandoned lots where people volunteer their time, their sweat, and in return for that, they receive things like fresh food or safer spaces and stronger bonds with their neighbors and people in their communities, in place of what the formal systems provide to us, which is, stress and anguish of going to collect a paycheck on a scheduled timing. Value is not just the paper or digital currency that you receive. It's also these other things within your life that hold meaning to you. So communities are creating value that really you cannot measure in anyone's paycheck. Having access to good health care is something that is so hard to measure. Although the healthcare system has prices for everything, I'm sure that none of us would put a price on our life and the quality of our lives. Those are immeasurable, infinitely expensive things. So those are just some examples to underscore one truth here, which is that value is not just about profit, it's about life. And so with these examples that I have given, I'm not saying that potential investors should not be modeling out or trying to understand how they would get a return on their investment. I'm not saying that You shouldn't be looking for certain types of growth potential in the deals that you would consider being a part of. I'm saying it, let's start to introduce other KPIs. Let's start to try to introduce other metrics by which we evaluate the deals. And those metrics should not just only be about how much profit you think that you are going to make. Because things like inflation erode on that profit. And also, if we're talking about investing in places like Africa and other places in the diaspora, if the goal behind investing is just to make money, then perhaps your KPI does stay with how much IRR, what IRR you think you're going to be able to achieve with a project, or trying to find a unicorn based upon the metrics that we normally would look at to consider something reaching unicorn status. But if you are investing in Africa, or you're trying to invest in any other parts of the world that have developing nations, then if your goal in investing in those places is about improving the quality of life, is about trying to do good, if it's about the greater good at all, because I know that there are a lot of people out here who do what they do because they want to help people. If that's your goal, then make sure that you start incorporating some KPIs, some metrics, put some things in your models to try to capture the intrinsic value of how you are going to make folks' lives better, how you're going to improve the quality of human life inside of your deal making process. And don't just simply look at how much profit you're going to make. Look at other metrics. Make sure that, of course, when you're starting to incorporate these other metrics, that sustainability is part of the conversation, right? Because you want to make sure that whatever you're investing in is going to have sustainability, that it will be able to continue to evolve and stand the test and the weight of time. But every single investment doesn't have to be a unicorn. So what you should take from this again is that if we only measure value in money, then we're missing the bigger picture. So some of the most transformative projects are measured not in dollars, but it's in improved lives. Imagine governments, investors, and communities are like embracing the mindset that I've just been discussing, where return on investment was measured in other things like cleaner air, reduction of poverty rates, higher literacy rates, stronger resilience. And just imagine looking at the quality of life by other metrics, the same way that folks look at quarterly earnings reports now. Places like Burkina Faso, Rwanda, Ghana, Detroit, these are places that are showing us that a better future is possible, and that future does not have to be built on greed and profit alone. It can be built on shared commitment, shared work, and shared values. So when you think about value of your own work, ask yourself, are you measuring what you do only in dollars alone? Or are you recognizing that you can also be paid back in dignity, in growth, and in community? People in Burkina Faso, as an example, they should be an example for all of us. By investing in themselves, they've shown that real prosperity comes from valuing life itself. So thank you all for listening to this episode. In our next episodes, we'll be able to continue to explore other conversations that have to do with things with private investment in Africa and the diaspora, ideas that can align with community-driven models to create more impact, as well as we may just talk about recent deals that have been happening insights to gain from those, our thoughts here at BPE on those deals, whether we think that those are great deals for Africa, or where we see that some things may be falling short, or where we think that focuses may be misaligned. We promise we will get to start some conversations about different deals that are happening, but through the conversations that were had, like the one today, we've brought some topics to you about some things that are happening in some of the countries, and hope that it sparks more conversation. So feel free to leave any commentary you have about this episode, and feel free to contact us with any questions or thoughts that you have. Thank you for listening, and join us again on our next episode. Remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any of our episodes.